Welcome to today's C.R.E lesson. We are going to outline the first account of creation in Genesis. Then we state responsibilities given to human beings by God in the Genesis stories of creation. Then we outline ways in which Christians care for God's creation today. The first account of creation. Number 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. On the first day, God created light and separated it from darkness. On the second day, God separated the waters above and waters below. That day, God created seas, land, and vegetation. Fourth day, God created sun, moon, and stars. On the fifth day, birds of the air and sea creatures. Sixth day, wild and domestic animals, and man in his own image and likeness. On the seventh day, God rested and made the day holy. Responsibilities given to human beings by God in the Genesis stories of creation: to procreate, to conserve the environment, to rule over the creation, to cultivate the land, to marry, to eat from the fruits provided in the garden, to make the animals, to till and guard the Garden of Eden. Ways in which Christians care for God's creation today: keeping, or rather you can just say maintaining, personal hygiene, practicing responsible parenthood, or rather you can just say bringing up children well, doing works of charity. This is what most people call or say helping the needy, taking care of the environment. This includes taking care of wild animals, avoiding pollution, preserving human life, providing medical facilities and services, condemning social injustices, preventing soil erosion, planting of trees, cleaning the environment, and educating the public on the need to conserve the environment. We are going to outline the order of the first biblical creation account. Then we show why man is superior to other creatures of God. Lastly, we state ways in which man continues to be a co-creator with God. The order of the first biblical creation account. On the first day, God created light and darkness. On the second day, God created the sky. On the third day, God created land, sea, and vegetation. On the fourth day, God created sun, moon, and stars. On the fifth day, birds and sea creatures were created by God. On the sixth day, God created animals and human beings. He rested on the Sabbath day and made it holy. Also, he made it the Sabbath day. Why man is superior to other creatures of God? Man was created in the image and likeness of God, who was given freedom and knowledge to choose good, who was given dominion over the rest of God's creation. He was given the privilege by God to name the animals. He is much dignified as he walks upright. He was blessed and commanded to multiply and fill the earth. He was also given the privilege of communicating to God through worship. Ways in which man continues to be a co-creator of God: through procreation, by caring and conserving the environment, preserving life and teaching its sacredness, establishing churches to worship God, through scientific and technological innovations, by enacting just laws and condemning unjust ones. And lastly, respecting and protecting the rights of others. Looking at God's plan of salvation. Remember, we learned that sin entered the world and it caused God's and people's relationship to be broken. Because of God's love and grace, He could not leave human beings with no hope for salvation. So what is salvation? Salvation basically is rescuing from danger. So now we are discussing the points on how God reconciled human beings and himself after Adam and Eve sinned against him. Number one, God looked for Adam and Eve to find out where they were. So he looked for them in the Garden of Eden. Even though they disobeyed him, he said in the Bible, "Where are you?" This basically shows that God cared for Adam and Eve. Rather, God cares for human beings. Number two, Adam and Eve were afraid to meet God. This is because they discovered they were naked. And here, how did God save them? God provided them with clothes. That is how He reconciled. Another way that God reconciled human beings and Himself is that God provided them with means to find food. Actually, that is, He put forth a means of looking for food. That is, He told human beings that they are going to you're going to till the land. Number four, God gave them a chance to punish Satan. That is, by crushing his head. And what did God say in the Bible? He said, "Man shall bruise the head." Number five, in order also God to reconcile with human beings, He sent His only Son, Jesus, to bring salvation to humankind. If you look at the prophecies, read the prophecy of Isaiah about the Messiah. Isaiah said the Messiah who would come will come to save the world. And that was part of God's plan for salvation. Number six, God entered into a covenant with Noah after the end of the flood and promised not to destroy the earth through flood again. So that is another way He reconciled with human beings. And number seven, God provided the 10 commandments. Here what we mean is that the commandments were given to Moses as an act of God's salvation to humankind. And lastly, God sent His prophets. For example, you can see that He sent Prophet Jeremiah to direct and guide people in the right way of life. Looking at the teachings from the biblical creation stories. We are looking at the lessons we get, or the lessons that we've learned from the biblical stories of creation. Number one, learn that man and woman were created for love and companionship. That is, when man and woman were created, they were created in order to give each other company. Number two, we learn that work and leisure are God's gift to human beings. So here is that work is a blessing. And work was created by God as a fulfillment of all human beings' responsibility for God's created universe. So all of us should be involved in working, doing something. We should be able to do something. And at the same time after we work, we should be able to have leisure. Number three, we learn that procreation is God's command. That human beings should multiply. They should give birth and fill the earth. Number four, we learn that life should be respected. During creation, God took a lot of time to give life to all living things and also to give life to man and woman. Therefore here, life should be respected. For example, here, we should not kill each other or destroy each other. Number five, human beings are commanded by God to take care of God's creation. Here, human beings are expected to act responsibly. That is, it will be wrong for human beings to misuse the environment, because they're expected to respect God's creation by preserving it and using it wisely. And if you check in the world today that people are misusing the creation through maybe destruction of forests, mining, and also irresponsible waste disposal. But as a Christian, you know that there are consequences to destroying the environment. So it is our duty to manage wisely the environment and not to destroy it. For example, we can manage it wisely by planting trees. Also, we are taught by the biblical creation accounts that human beings have the ability to be co-creators with God. That is, we can be creators as God. That is through science and technology. Human beings are able to have or have made breakthroughs in medicine, farming, and even in art and creativity. That is, through creativity we are able to create new things with the environment that we were given by God. Human beings were made to have fellowship with God. That is, human beings were created in order to communicate with God. And we communicate with God through prayer, through worshiping Him. We also learn in the biblical creation accounts that marriage was instituted by God. And we learn that because God blessed marriage, because it is the one that's, like I said earlier, it gives man and woman companionship. It ensures survival and continuity of human race through procreation. So marriage was instituted by God. Lastly, we learn that human race is one in origin and destiny. That all humans, whether you are man or woman, we came from one source, that we were all created by God. Even living and non-living things, all of us, all creation on this earth was created by God. So we should be able to live in harmony with each other. Looking at how Christians can care for God's creation. Number one, Christians should treat the rest of the God's creation with respect. Number two, Christians should preserve and conserve the environment. For example, by condemning the cutting of vegetation, for example, in deforestation. Number three, Christians can care for God's creation by caring for the animals. That is, they advocate for laws that protect them from wanted destruction. Number four, Christians can contribute to the scientific discovery of medicine. That is, by providing money donations to such institutions. Also, Christians can care for God's creation today by coming together and joining hands in preventing and controlling soil erosion. For example, by building gabions and even ensuring that people don't dig near riverbanks. Number six, Christians should keep and maintain personal hygiene, ensure that they care for God's creation. Because remember, us as human beings, we are also God's creation. So taking good care of our bodies shows that we are caring for God's creation. Christians should also practice responsible parenthood by planning their families. This is whereby you bring forth children that you are able to fully cater to and provide all the needs. Christians should also help the needy by giving them relief food, building shelter, and provision of education to them, as in to the needy. Number nine, Christians should avoid pollution, which is a health hazard to human beings. By this, they show that they are caring for God's creation. And at number 10, by Christians preaching against abortion, murder, and robbery with violence, it shows that they care for God's creation.
We are identifying the ways in which Christians care for God's creation today. Number one, planting trees, avoiding pollution, cleaning the environment, caring for the animals, conserving vegetation, preventing soil erosion, bringing their children well. That is, bringing up their children well, helping the needy, and providing medical care. We are looking at the instructions given to man by God in the creation stories? Number one, to control, or you can just say to have dominion over all creations of God. Number two, to till the land and subdue it. Number three, to procreate, or rather you can say to multiply and fill the earth. Number four, naming every creature. Another instruction given to man by God in the creation stories is man and wife should be together for companionship, and man and wife should complement each other, to choose between good and bad, to eat from the garden, and lastly, to obey God's command.
Similarities between the traditional African concept of evil and the biblical concept of sin in Genesis. In both cases, sin and evil is seen as arising from man's disobedience, greed, and selfishness. So we find that in both cases, God is viewed as a supreme being and he is good. Or we can rather say that God's wish for man is good, and so is not the author of sin or evil. In both cases, sin and evil are seen as being caused by an external force. In both cases, or rather both agree that the results of sin and evil are suffering, death, and hardship. In both cases, God is the guardian of moral law and order. Another similarity between the traditional concept of evil and biblical concept of sin in Genesis is that in both cases, sin and evil alienates human beings from God. What we mean is that it separates human beings from God. In both, human race has the ability to overcome evil and sin. That is, human beings have the ability to overcome any evil or sin that they commit. I believe that sin and evil can be inherited from parents and elders. At number 9, both cases, evil, sin in the world was introduced by an evil spiritual power. We are explaining the consequences of sin according to the biblical accounts of creation. Number 1, sin alienated human beings from God. That alienation here means that it separated human beings from God. Number 2, pain became part of human experience. For example, the painful childbearing. Number 3, death sentence was placed on all people. So human beings became prone to death. Number 4, murderous feelings began to enter into people's hearts. Human beings sinning announced God's anger over man. What do you mean? It pronounced God's anger. This brought forth God's anger over man. Number 6, it made God to confuse human language. Number 7, human beings were to struggle in order to meet their needs. So they have to toil to cater to their needs or to get what they need. Number 8, what was innocent and good became shameful. Number 9, enmity developed between man and wild animals. That is, wild animals. The earth became under a curse. So the earth was cursed. And lastly, the lifespan of human beings was reduced.
We are looking at what is the relationship between human beings and the environment in the Genesis stories of creation. Number 1, both were created by God. They share the same origin and destiny. Number 3, human beings are supposed to use the environment for their survival. Human beings have a duty to care for their environment. Both human beings and the environment owe their existence to each other. Human beings are superior to all other creatures.
At the similarities in the biblical accounts of creation. So we are looking how the first account of creation and the second account of creations are similar. So if you read Genesis chapter 1 and 2, where you get the two accounts of creation, you will know how they are similar, because mostly, the Bible is used in marking all C.R.E. questions. So you can read chapter 1 and 2 to affirm the similarities that I'm telling you about the two accounts of creation. In both accounts, God is acknowledged as the creator. That is the one who has done the creation in both accounts. Number two, God created both living and non-living things. So we realize that all living and non-living things were created by Holy God. Number three, God provides for the needs of His creation. That is, everything that was created by God, God is ready to cater for what is needed. We find out in the creation story that we were given a way of getting food. That is by tilling the land. And even at first God and Adam and Eve were given the Garden of Eden as a means of God providing for their needs. Number four, another similarity is that human beings are presented as special creatures with responsibilities and privileges. That means here that human beings are special before the eyes of God. Remember, human beings are made in the likeness and the image of God. Another similarity is that human beings share in the life of God. How do we share in the life of God? That is by worshiping God. Yes, when we pray, we are talking with Him. We are sharing our life with Him. Number six, human beings are created to work and transform the environment responsibly. So we should always work because it is a mandate from God. And lastly, another similarity is marriage is ordained by God. We say marriage is ordained by God because marriage ensures continuity of the human race, that is through procreation. Outlining teachings about marriage from the creation accounts in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. Number one, marriage is ordained by God. Number two, it is between a man and a woman. And there's number three, marriage is a covenant. Or rather, you can say marriage is permanent. Number four, it is for procreation. And number five, it is a continuation of God's work of creation. As people are able to give birth or procreation, as continuing God's creation. Number six, man and woman complement each other. Or rather, you can say they help each other. Number seven, husband and wife should not be ashamed of each other. There's number eight, marriage is for companionship. And at number nine, marriage is for love. Did you understand? Let me know in the comment section below and what I can look at in tomorrow's video. Thanks a lot for subscribing and listening to me. God bless you.